The Sooners get a quarterback recruit, and we take a closer look at Bob Stoops' hometown. Hello, I'm Mike Taylor, and welcome to the latest edition of OU Football with Jake Trotter, a weekly look into Sooner football with the Oklahoman's beat writer. Jake, the season is just a week away, but it's never too soon to talk about recruiting. First question, OU picked up a quarterback recruit on Sunday night. Was that a must-need for the class of 2009? And just tell me a little bit about the guy they got.
Probably a must-need because after this year, Joey Halsey be gone, and that leaves OU with two quarterbacks on the roster, which is kind of dangerous unless you want to implement a walk-on into third-string quarterback. So getting a Drew Allen helps them feel comfortable about having three quarterbacks for the next couple of years. And what they're going to do now, I think they're going to target the Connor Wood kid out of Houston, who might be the top quarterback in the entire class of 2010, and let those guys duke it out to see who replaces Sam Bradford.
All right, next, let's talk about this series that we're doing, Stoops at 10. It continued today in the Oklahoman with your story about Bob Stoops' youth in Youngstown, Ohio. What did you learn about the city? You went out there this summer, and how did you find out how it impacted Bob and how he grew up and became a coach?
Well, I had the chance to work in Ohio for a couple of years in Middletown, Ohio, and Youngstown is basically Middletown East. Very similar cities, big steel towns back in the 50s that have since lost their economy. So there's a lot of hardship, a lot of transition going on in both those towns, trying to figure out what their identity is going to be. But when Bob grew up, it wasn't quite to that point yet. The steel was just leaving; it wasn't gone yet. And I think that blue-collar mentality people had of working in the steel mills really translated over well to all the kids that have grown up in Youngstown about the value of a hard day's work and being disciplined and outworking your opponent. And I think obviously as a coach that's translated well here.
His dad, Ron Stoops, grew up as a longtime high school coach in Youngstown, and it sounded like from reading your story that this guy took things pretty serious. I mean, and that's how all the brothers grew up. What was the impression you got from talking to people about Ron and his influence on Bob?
Well, like I said before, I think Bob, the way he runs his team, is very disciplined with his team. I mean, they will if they don't act right, you're going to get dealt with summarily. So I think that directly comes from his upbringing with Ron Sr. The alumni director at Oklahoman, he told me a story about one day he was having coffee with Ron, and Ron asked him how Mark Stoops was doing in class. He had him for class at the time. And he said, well, he's missed a couple of homework assignments, kind of joking around. And Ron put his cup of coffee down and walked right over to the hall, got Mark out of class, pulled him out to the hallway, and was just berating him, right in front of everybody. And Paul Greger, the alumni director, was sitting there. He goes, I was just embarrassed. I didn't mean for that to happen. But you understood as a Stoops kid growing up, what was right and what was wrong. And I think that's had a great impact on Bob Stoops.
All right, finally, the football special section comes out on Sunday. Our theme for this year is Dirty Jobs. You wrote a couple of stories for that, one about OU's offensive line and then one about Sam Bradford, who has to spend a lot of time in the film room. Here's a question for you. As a former player yourself in high school and in college, what do you see as the dirtiest job on or off the field for a football player?
Well, in college, it'd have to be the meetings. I mean, the meetings are incredible. You don't really see that in high school as much, but watching film, meeting about this, meeting about that. I mean, you pray for the time you can go do conditioning drills on the field, and especially at a place like Oklahoma, as much as they're watching film and meeting. I mean, it's got to get a little tiring and cumbersome at some point. And, for Bradford, he's the starter, he's going to play. But the guys you got to really feel for is the Joey Halseys of the world. I mean, how much time they put into their craft, and, he might play one or two games this year. It takes a special individual, I think, to be that number two quarterback and know that you're always going to be the number two quarterback, but get yourself to be ready to play too. And I think a lot of credit needs to be given to Joey Halsey because he's going to be an important player on this team this year in a lot of ways. I think that we saw last year at Texas Tech, he got stronger as the game went on. I think that's going to give him a lot of experience for this season, but it's tough being the number two, just sitting back there and waiting for your chance.
Alrighty, thanks, Jake. Be sure to pick up the football section in Sunday's edition of the Oklahoman, and be sure to follow all the latest news and analysis of OU football with the best coverage team in the state at newsok.com, newsok.tv, and every day in the Oklahoman.